I head up ADAPT's research data. My team is very interested in how we take information, we transform it into insights, and then contextualize it to add business value. I'm so excited because today I get to do this with you, a room of incredible data leaders, and we get to create a story with your survey information. First, we'll start with some of your peer perspectives across different departments and what they have to say about data delivery. Then we'll focus in on you. What are some of your core initiatives and challenges? From those, we'll draw out a couple of common features in the data set because I'm going to run my machine learning algorithms through them. See what makes some of you better at overcoming some of these challenges, and what are the levers others pull to drive them further along being confident in delivering on their journey. Sounds like fun, right? Let's start. Your Chief Digital Officer, their biggest barrier to customer experience is inconsistent data across platforms. And that makes a lot of sense because when you have disparate data sources across applications or difference in things like definitions across departments, it's impossible for them to develop a single source of truth. Because of that, they want to invest in data quality and data governance to fix that issue. Then, when those hygiene levels are sorted, they want to get a little bit fancy. They want to explore how AI can drive a new depth of insights and how it can start to automate and engineer those customer journeys. We then have your CFO, and their number one transformation initiative this year is to increase dashboard usage. That is so cool. It's cool because traditionally what's happened in finance departments and still in a lot of your organizations today is they want to know two things for reporting. First, can I pull reliable data into a spreadsheet format? And the second is, will it come in a consistent way every time? Because they'll do incredible things with automating spreadsheet templates, looking at EBITDA, looking at tax, profit. That dashboard consumption is a shift towards commercial analytics. You're increasingly finding people that have undergrads in things like accounting now going on and doing masters in business analytics. There's also an increased curiosity in that department. A lot of them ask me, how difficult is it to learn Python? And can it help me on my career path? We've got to help as data leaders translate that curiosity into business value. We've then got your HR leadership. And when we ask them about the most critical digital skills that they have to fill, cybersecurity is up the top. I think we all understand the pressure that that department's under. Then there's a lot of you. And HR is actually a really good partnership to build, not just with attraction, but with how we retain staff, how we incentivize them to stay, how we spot people from different departments that might want a career in technology and data, and how we scale our knowledge out through the business. I should point out with this slide that in terms of the statistics that my team and I do, it's incredibly easy. It is so simple to find ways that there's cross-pollination and commonality between departments in focus areas, which makes this a little bit perplexing. When we ask about your top barriers to initiatives, and we ask the consistent list across the leadership, competing business priorities comes up again and again and again. We then ask a persona-specific question, and you've also cited that a lack of a consistent data culture is a problem. It has a weird interaction effect with the competing business priorities, and we'll get to that a bit later. The big question is, how do you solve this problem? It's not easy. But I'll give you an example of an organization that took an interesting approach, which is Treasury Wine Estates. If you don't know them, they own Penfolds and Lindeman's wine. They truly compete on a global scale. They decided to do a digital and data transformation, focusing on how knowledge transfers up in the organization. They wanted to listen to people on the ground that had tacit knowledge and let it fuel better business processes. Through aggregation and summary of information, it made it easier for them to consume and to provide feedback. They also nominated different champions in each department that were involved in the project design and driving the implementation. Now, this sort of initiative might not suit all of your businesses or government departments, but the concepts behind authenticity, providing closed feedback, using employee champions. These are portable concepts to any type of organization. Something else that comes up a lot is the skills conversation. So let's see where your biggest skill gaps are. So we have 2022 up that side, 2023 up that side for the most significant skill gaps. Normally for my team, I'm going to break one of my rules. I say limit it to 5 for a Sankey chart. We've done 6 here. Can you see why? The limited skills of your end user base has gone from 6 last year to top this year. Because you can't democratize information and data if people don't understand how to use it and feel empowered to make decisions on it. Data architects have dropped off a little bit, and I gotta be careful how I word this. It's not that we've had an increase in people in that job space, but the vendor landscape is helping you solve this. There's better ETL tools, better data warehousing tools, ways to identify relationships in the information. Data scientists have dropped off, and I take that very personally. I am joking, but there is an issue with people in my profession. When we get better at building models, we tend to focus on tuning parameters to improve performance rather than business explainability. But there is a really good cross-training opportunity for those people because the gap to machine learning is not that far. And you can see that there's an increase in focus on AI and ML specialists. So what are the effective tools you see in driving a data-driven strategy? I really like this list. I like those top 4 because they form a logical progression. We have visualization tools, eyes on the screen. We have the BI tools that underpin the visualizations, and we've highlighted them in the same color because there is a convergence happening there. People are wanting to do the analytics and visualize it in the same place. We have the cubes to build that reporting structure that will fuel the analytics, and then we have data governance so that we can firstly secure the entire pipeline of data, and the second is garbage in, garbage out, right? So what have we seen so far that can form the premise of a machine learning model? You said end user skills is an inhibitor. You said that the skills differ between departments and how they value information. And visualization tools are effective, but do your users have the ability to use them to make better business decisions? So our decision variable is simple. It's the data literacy of your end users. And we ask you on a scale of 0 to 100, what proportion of your end users have high literacy? That's pretty bad. 35%. Your central quartile is still below that 50% mark. And the reason why I chose this visualization, I do realize it's a continuous variable, is because we're going to do some classification problems. We're going to see for low, medium, and high what common feature sets there are in each group and what changes between groups. So have a quick think about your organization. Do you have low, moderate, or high degrees of end-user data literacy? You all kind of know where you are? Yeah, cool. There's a really interesting relationship between the data literacy at the bottom and the top layers of the organization. You can see people with low levels of end-user literacy, only 5% of them say that their leadership are really good at harnessing data. Gets a bit better for moderates, and then there's an astronomical jump there, where 50% of people with high literacy at the low levels also have high literacy at the top levels. It's still not great, but there is a significant piece of evidence there that instead of targeting all end users for data literacy, maybe we can start to look at the department heads because there's be a trickle-down effect for how they value information. If we take all the most important attributes and pop them into a decision tree, this is what we get for classification of end-user data literacy. Now, a word of caution. These things can be really confusing to look at if you don't control the depth and the leaf size. But if you take a second to talk people through them, they're really important tools to help management decision-making. I'll show you. Let's start up that side. We asked, what's the ability of your organization to provide continuous training? Simply, if you're a beginner, you go up the top, you got low literacy. If you're really good at it, you've got high-end user literacy. The people somewhere in the middle is where you get a bit of nuance. So follow that center strand for me. So you're okay at it? Are you going to start prioritizing investments in it? No? Don't expect something to change. You still have low literacy. If you are, then it comes back to that leadership layer. Are they going to incentivize it? Are they going to reinforce the training? And you can see the results for that for low and high literacy are pretty self-explanatory. We see an interesting thing with the consumption of advanced AI tools with people with high degrees of literacy. They see deep learning and neural networks as more effective in driving a data-driven organization. We see the same thing for generative AI. And a lot of this comes down to context, right? Do people understand bias and the limitations and not just copying something from like a ChatGPT or a Midjourney or Copilot into their production line? I'm not going to cover this off too much because we have Richard Fleming and then Lee Hicken who are going to talk about how to use AI to drive competitive advantage. They're both on later this morning. So that's our first machine learning model. I'm a man of my word, I promised you two. So we saw that competing business priorities was an issue. We saw that that lack of literacy at the top level is a problem as well. And what we didn't show you, but 50% of you say that your organizations are not good at harnessing data for decision making. In fact, when we asked you about the balance between people using experience versus using data to drive decisions, it's kind of somewhere in the middle. So you can have the most incredible data strategy for how you believe data can transform your organization. But with all these support mechanisms, how confident are you in delivering on it? So this is what Jim showed you this morning. This is the level of confidence of the audience in delivering on a data strategy. Those endpoints pose a massive problem for our machine learning models. So what Jim correctly did is we grouped the 4s and 5s together, the 1s and 2s together, and we see the confidence there. Jim did make an excellent point as well. If we can get that 49 up to about 60%, we can start looking at the 5s out of 5s. What's that real special ingredient that they use that gives them confidence? Just to daisy chain back for a second, data literacy of end users is significant in giving you confidence in driving a data strategy. So all those things that we discussed before, you can implement them to give you more confidence on your delivery. When we asked about some of your barriers to building a data-driven organization, this is particularly interesting. People not confident in delivery, 71% of them say that their organizations lack clear and aspirational success metrics. And that makes an incredible amount of sense because if you don't know what you're working towards and you don't have a way to measure it, how then you evaluate it, tweak it, and improve it? That's why only 25%, about a quarter of you who are confident in delivery, say that this is an issue. That's still a significant portion, and if you do like visualizations and you do work in that space, David McCandless has a great book called Information is Beautiful. And one of the things that he recommends is gauges, right? Where are you now? What's the target? Make it really clear. Then find some correlated variables that contribute to that target that's easy for people to link actions and behaviors to driving those. So they can see, okay, if I increase that, it's going to move the gauge a bit more. If I increase that, it moves the gauge a little bit further. We started this off with looking at some relationships in terms of how your colleagues across departments view data. I want to show you something interesting about how those relationships can help you drive confidence in a data strategy. You can see that people who are confident, they generally have a better relationship with the CIO. And that's not just about them giving you the tools that you need. It's about building the right network, the right infrastructure, the right architecture to underpin things like data latency, good transfer of information, and helping you secure it. The CFO, people who are more confident have a better relationship there. And you saw all the different areas that you can work with the CFO on to help them increase dashboard usage, integrate data across the organization. Having a good relationship with the CFO is not about them saying yes to you all the time. It is about you consulting with them for how they can use data to drive their business unit and listening to them on how you can measure the business value and what will add the best return on investment and return on value to your data initiatives. We have the CEO as well. Still not great even for the confident people, only 45%. And Matt will show you later how that distributes. It's the CEO we don't get a lot of time with. But when we do, we want to help understand what's the 3, the 5-year plan, what's the strategy, and how does data fit into that to drive organizations forward.